Hello everybody, welcome again to Crockett Creek Brewery. Today we have a very special video for y'all today. We are going to be making a very old mead. This is my favorite mead recipe. It is my rosemary black pepper mead. If you haven't read my post, it is a 800-year-old recipe from Wales. I call it the Green Dragon because it's from Wales. This recipe was initially made as a headache tonic in Wales in the 1100s. I found this recipe after searching through hundreds of pages of web content, and finally I found an ancient Viking recipe for mead. So that's what we're going to be making today. Now, the difference between making mead and wine. Mead is considerably more time consuming than making our regular juice wine like you saw in my last tutorial for making apple wine. But the difference is quite subtle. So, in our juice wine tutorial, you saw me add juice and sugar. Those were our two fermentables. Our fermentable and our flavor. In mead, you have one. Honey. This is Fulshire honey, a local honey from a town just up the road from us. This provides both the flavor and the sugar to this brew. You're not going to add any other sugars or fermentables to this, and the only other ingredients we're going to add is rosemary and black pepper. The only reason we add those is to add additional nuances to the flavor and potential medicinal benefits if you're going towards more of a tonic as opposed to a regular drinking mead. So, as we prepare to make our mead, you're going to want to heat up your honey. I put a pot on the stove to low heat, and I place my bottles of honey inside that pot of water, because heated honey pours a lot better than cold honey. If you tried to pour cold honey into your carboy, it'll take you hours. These have already been heated up. You can see they're nice and liquidy inside there. We're using 3 pounds today. 3 pounds of honey. We also are using Fleischmann's active dry bread yeast. I already have it hydrating in here. Of course, you're going to need your 1 gallon glass carboy. Once you sanitize these, if you see the bubbles inside, don't worry about those. They're perfectly fine. They're not going to hurt your brew at all. You're also going to need your hydrometer and your cylinder. Now, today I actually planted a rosemary plant in my garden, and I clipped off a couple of branches. You're going to be using a little less than 1/4 cup of rosemary if you're using dried rosemary. I almost always use fresh rosemary, and I cut 2 4-inch sprigs. That much. 2 4-inch sprigs. You're going to use 2 teaspoons of fresh crushed black pepper. These were peppercorns a few minutes ago. I put them in a little baggie and crushed them with a hammer. Before we begin, I'm enjoying a little bit of my sparkling lemon lime wine today. It turned out wonderful. I actually made another one yesterday, so hopefully in a few days that one will be ready. And I want to make a side note about this. This is one of my cranberry wines I made the other day. This one was made with 1 gallon of ocean spray cranberry juice. I thought it would be 100% cranberry juice and that it would ferment well. I was wrong. Even though it's 100% cranberry juice with no additives, there's something else in here that I did not think about. And I didn't even recognize what was in here until I began to rack this today. As I began to rack it, it dyed my siphon red. That tells me there's an artificial red dye in this juice that is non-fermentable. And it may have actually been killing my yeast. So when you choose your juice, try to choose organic, all-natural, 100% juice as close as you can. This particular wine has been fermenting for 6 weeks, and it stalled twice. I've tried every trick I know to get this to ferment, and I couldn't. It simply wouldn't go because of that red dye. It still fermented out to about 7%, which is a general cranberry cider fermentation. It still tastes just fine. But it's not the 11-12% cranberry wine that I was expecting. So watch out for that. Now, back to our rosemary black pepper mead. We also have our sanitized funnel. We're going to need this when we pour our honey. Let's go ahead and do that. Like I said, this is a 800-year-old recipe. This is one of my favorites. Now, as you pour your honey, you'll notice there's residual honey in your bottles. Take a little bit of your water, pour it in there, and shake it up. You want to get every drop of honey out of this bottle. 1, because honey is expensive. And 2, this is your fermentable sugar for this brew. You don't want to leave any behind. Shake this up nice and good. Get all the honey out. And there we go. Let's do that to the other 2 bottles we have. I really like these older mead and wine recipes because I like to keep these traditions alive from the older days. Like I said in a previous video, I have not seen or met anyone else who makes this mead. As far as I know, I'm the only one that's still making this 800-year-old rosemary black pepper mead. And that makes me feel good knowing that that tradition will not be lost to time because I'm sharing it with you guys. And I was hesitant about sharing this recipe with you guys because this is kind of my baby. This is a closely guarded secret. I found this after hours and hours of searching, and no one else is making it. I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to share my secret recipe with y'all, but I will. For the sake of y'all's knowledge and everyone's learning, I'll share it with everybody. Most of your ancient mead recipes, if you're able to find any, use what's called a wild fermentation. So you'll see them say in the recipe, if they say it at all, to leave it out overnight or leave it out for 3 days covered with a light cloth. That is encouraging wild yeasts that are found either in the honey or in the air to make their way into the brew and ferment it. They did not add commercial yeasts, whether bread yeast or ale yeast, wine yeast, champagne yeast, etc. They didn't add those to their meads. They fermented naturally. One of these days I'm going to make one. The only problem we have nowadays is it's kind of uncontrollable. You don't know how much it's going to ferment. It might ferment to 5%, it might ferment to 25%. You have no idea what a wild ferment is going to do. So there we go, 3 pounds of honey added to our carboy. Let's go ahead and add our 2 4-inch sprigs of rosemary. Just put the whole thing in there. Just like that. And let's go ahead and add our black pepper.
Oh, dang it.
Here we are. The fresher your ingredients are, the better this is going to taste. I have made this with dried rosemary like you find in your spice rack. And I've made it with coarse ground black pepper, already ground in the jar. The flavor wasn't that good to me. It didn't taste that great, didn't taste that fresh, that sharp. It didn't taste bad by any means, and if that's all you have, by all means, use it. But I would encourage you to use the freshest ingredients possible. If you're growing rosemary in your garden, use it. If you can get whole black peppercorns and crush them yourselves, use them. So, what we're going to do is we're going to fill this up with a little bit more water. Up to about half a gallon, a little over half a gallon. And then we're going to shake it up. Let's go ahead and put the rest of that water in there. I'm going to need to refill my pitcher anyway. Okay, let me refill my pitcher. I'll be right back. Now I use regular tap water in my brews because I don't mind drinking out of my tap. It doesn't taste bad to me. If your tap water is bad, don't use it in your brews. Use bottled water. Use the big 1-gallon jugs you get at the grocery store, the 5-gallon jugs. But if your tap water tastes good, by all means use it. So we have our carboy filled up, a little over half. We're going to go ahead and shake it up to get everything mixed up. Now, while you're shaking up your meads, you're going to shake them more than you would your juice wines. Because if you can see on the bottom, see all that honey right here that's sticking to the bottom? You want all of this to be homogeneous. All mixed in. Shake the mess out of this. So, if it takes you 10-20 minutes to shake this, shake it 10-20 minutes. Because if you don't, those sugars are going to be stuck to the bottom and they may not ferment, and very possibly, you will get a false reading on your hydrometer. So you might have more or less alcohol in there than you initially thought that you did.
There's a dumpster on the backside of that house.
Let that settle out for a second. It has been said that meads are the oldest fermented beverage known to man. There have been evidences in ancient Egyptian tombs and ruins of the Babylonian kingdoms of mead recipes.
The house we were just
And that is really the quintessential thing I'm trying to do with this channel, is to bring back these old recipes, these old styles of living that have been lost to time. Mead is a really, really good drink. It's really healthy, but some people might not like it. I know some people who don't like whiskeys or other savory alcoholic beverages don't like drinking mead. It does have that sweet, savory taste to it, especially if you add rosemary and black pepper to it. That only enhances the savory notes of the drink. It's not a light beverage. And that's not only talking about the alcohol content. It doesn't taste light in your mouth, such as, a Bud Light or a champagne that tastes light and flour in your mouth. No, meads are generally going to be heavier than that. And so, as you ferment these and make these yourself, I think you'll begin to appreciate the history, the tradition, and the drink itself. You'll be enjoying a drink that has been enjoyed by the Vikings, by almost every culture that's ever made a honey wine in history. I'm going to be making another one of these next week with juniper berries. I've always tried to make a juniper berry mead, but I've always added either too much or too little juniper berries. And those can be really detrimental to a brew. So I think I finally found a recipe that we can add just the right amount of juniper berries. Okay, as you can see, our brew is homogeneous.
behind you.
Let's double check that there's nothing sticking to the bottom. We're good. Let's top this off to our 1 gallon mark. First, let's go ahead and add our yeast in. As I said before, we're using Fleshman's Active Dry Bread Yeast. Get every little bit of yeast you can without spilling it everywhere. Okay, so we've gone ahead and added all of our yeast, and we've cleaned up the mess that we made. As you can see, the yeast up here has separated from the honey. We're going to shake this up one more time, get everything mixed in, and then we're going to add our raisins. Like I said in a previous video, raisins add mouthfeel to the brew. They add tannins. They also add a slight amount of sugars to your brew that get the yeasts excited. Those are used in comparison to commercial yeast nutrients that other people might add to their brews. But since I like to be all natural, I use raisins instead. We're going to add exactly 25 raisins to a 1 gallon brew. We're going to kind of crush them and pinch them in our hand as we drop them in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 'This brew takes about 4 weeks to ferment. There's 10. And you're not going to want to touch this brew for the entire 4 weeks. Don't shake it up. Don't stir it. There's 15. If you don't pinch these, what's going to happen is your raisins will swell up and they'll make little marble-sized raisins. And they're not letting out any nutrients into your brew. The only thing you're adding is potential wild yeast on the exterior of the raisins. So you're going to want to either crush these, grind these, pinch them in your hand, somehow pierce the skin of these raisins to get them into your brew. One last time, we're going to shake this up before we check with the hydrometer. The more oxygen you can add into this brew, the more you shake it, the better. Those yeasts need that oxygen to begin fermentation. Okay. We have our hydrometer and our cylinder here. Let's go ahead and pour a little bit of our brew in there and try not to get any solids. You don't really want any raisins or rosemary into your mead, or that'll throw off your reading. There we go. We're going to let that settle out a second, get rid of some of the bubbles, make sure it's not sticking to the side at all. And this is reading really, really high.
It's mostly
so
paper.
We are reading.
He always starts the argument.
We are reading 1.102. And that is probably going to ferment out to about 16% alcohol, which is on the higher end of your wine brews. Go ahead and re-sanitize your hydrometer and pour this back into your must. You don't want to waste any of this honey. Now, I'm actually going to add a little bit more water to this brew, just because sometimes I'm a little bit greedy and I want a little bit more out of my 1 gallon. We're going to top it off. Just below the handle. Right to about there. I usually top mine off right below the handle of the carboy. Now, if you do that, you're going to need to shake it up again and double check your reading with the hydrometer, because that extra water will have diluted your brew. Shake it up one more time. And I like to double check my hydrometer readings also, just to make sure there's nothing weird going on with the brews. All right. Oh, I put a little bit too much in there. Pour a little bit back in. We are still reading 1.102, which is perfectly fine. Pour that back into your brew. And there we go.
No.
The last thing you're going to need is your airlock. I've gone ahead and attached my stopper to it, filled it up to the no-fill line. The thing you're going to want to make sure to do with these airlocks is you want to make sure they are absolutely dry. If you don't, they may pop out of your brew. So wipe down the stopper, wipe down the inside of your carboy, make sure everything is dry, because if you have a bad seal, not only will it not bubble, you're also letting other gases into your brew, like oxygen, that could turn it into vinegar. Also make sure that your carboys are the right size for your stoppers. In my 1 gallon carboys, they use a number 6 size bung or stopper. If you use a number 8 size bung, it will not fit. So make sure when you order your materials, you order the right size. All right. Our stopper's in. Our airlock is reading negative pressure, which means that there's more pressure inside the brew than there is in the ambient air. So we're going to go ahead and put a label on this, and it should be ready in about 1 month. In 1 month, you want to check it with your hydrometer. If it reads dry, which is 1.00 to 0.999, it's done. Go ahead and bottle it. If it reads anything more than that, there is residual sweetness in your brew, and you want to leave it for another week. Check it again. If it's the same reading, your yeast may have died out, it may have stalled.
Are they not repeating?
If you want it dry, go ahead and add more yeast to it. Or if it's a low enough gravity reading, go ahead and bottle it. It might just be a little sweeter than normal.
Is that your aunt?
So, that's all I have today. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. And I hope y'all enjoy making your own meads and enjoy my secret recipe. So, y'all take care, and we'll see y'all on the next video. Bye now.